Hey guys, how's it going? Today I just want to go over briefly a simple way to compress a bass bus, a synth bus, even individual channels. An easy way to compress a signal and start to get that glued feeling in the mix. You know, sometimes we have so much elements going on in so many different stems that they start to get untied and a little bit loose, you could say, and you really want that glued feeling in most bass lines and synths, especially in dance music, because you really want the song to feel unified and thick in the mix for the bassline signal. If there's no compression, sometimes you can achieve this by a lot of EQ multi-band stuff and really getting down to really EQing stuff to make it fit. But when it comes down to it, compression can help you out a lot, and there's a lot of simple compressors out there that you guys can benefit from if you're not using these ones. I chose the CLA 3A and the 2A from Waves because I believe the general population of producers mostly has this on their computer. So I didn't want to pick a compressor that I thought most people might not have. So I believe a lot of people have that compressor. So today I'm going to go over what I generally do with those plugins to achieve a more richer and glued sound in my bass lines, and also how I bust the compressor to help an additional processing of the compressor to even glue it a little extra. So I'm going to show you briefly what I do. And the best part about the CLA, both the 2A and 3A, is they're very simple. You know, in compressors, it can be confusing at first because a standard compressor usually has about 5 different things like the release, the output, the attack, the ratio, the threshold. That's kind of the parameters. But the best part in the 3A, I'll show you here, as you guys know, it's very simply laid out, because what it's going to do is act as a peak reduction compressor, and it's going to compress the signal coming through to a certain gain that you set it at. And it's kind of great. It's so easy to use, but it's also effective if you use it correctly without over compressing your signal, because that's when you start losing dynamics and all that good stuff that you just created with your sound design. So with that being said, don't overdo compression. That's not the idea here. So I'm going to play my song Janjira that came out on Flamingo. I'm going to just use that as an example here, and I'll play the drop with you, and then I'll go through what I did. All right, so I'm going to go over each stem here, and I'm not going to go through the whole project. If you guys want to see a more extensive look on this track, I do have it uploaded on my YouTube. If you guys have time afterwards, go check that out. And I'm going to go through what I used on the compressors for each layer. I did use 3A on all of these bass layers. You can see here I have them all lined up, but also you can see here bus 13 in the mixer. I took all of these bass layers and I bust them right over to here to this additional processing for the 2A to grab any more peak reduction and compress the signal a little more. So let's open up the 3A and I'll solo this out. So you can see that subtle difference. Like I said earlier, don't overdo it with compression. It can completely ruin a certain sound that you guys have worked so hard to make. So the way I'm using this is, you have to be careful with this. Like I said, the way this works is the gain obviously is going to give you dB, but the way you want to reduce your signal is, like, you need to use your ears obviously here. You don't want to make the sound like you have this mix at a level of -6. You want to try to keep it how you mix down your song. You're not trying to make this extremely lower level, and you don't want to make this an extremely higher level. This is to really compress and glue the sound and not change to the mix level that you guys have worked so hard to achieve beforehand. So basically how to get that is, my rule of thumb is I usually gain relatively what I'm trying to reduce here with the peak. Sometimes I'm about a dB lower on the peak reduction, and this should be reading around the -3+ to -4 here, and that means it's going to be obviously reducing which number you have here. But like I said, you need to use your ears because you're not trying to change the level of dB too much. You're just trying to compress and unify and glue the sound a little bit. So I'm trying to read that meter until I find a sweet spot with the peak reduction knob here. I'm trying to find a sweet spot in that -4 range, -5 max, because then I'm meeting my gain. So I'm not changing. So like I said, that means I'm not going to be changing the general level here. Everything's going to sound similar to how I mixed it, but now it's going to sound more compressed and unified with the 3A, which is the goal here. Yeah, so as you can see, right around the 4 spot is really good. It's sounding warm. It's sounding glued together. Now I'll do that with the same next few stems. For the 3A, I'll do the same exact technique that I've used in that one, just with a new sound. Same idea. So that's generally what's going on for the 3A. Now, as I said, these are really simple, and I can really dig into another compressor with the threshold and release and attack, but that gets a little more complicated, and I'm going to do that in another video as a separate compressor. But this, I wanted to show a simple way to compress and start gluing your sound for any people that really aren't into compressors, because a lot of people do shy away from using them. You know, when I first started years and years ago, I was a little bit afraid of compressors, to be honest, but once I started using them and understanding how they can benefit your mix, they really are a great tool to have in your studio. So like I said, use them, just use them very, very lightly, you know, don't overdo it. So I've did that for all my layers for the bass here, and then like I said, I went over and bust those few layers, grabbed them all, bust them to 13. And the reason I do additional compression over here on the bus is because I want to catch any more peaks all together as a unit, all together as one bass stem. You know, you want to individually do your stuff here in your channels, and that's always great to do your processing. But the beauty of busing stuff is you can do additional processing to then make the complete, to make the stems feel like a complete sound. And that's the idea behind busing. And I always find it effective to also compress or do a little bit more over here on the bus. So I use the 2A from Waves. Like I said, the 3A and 2A is what we're working with. Very simple but effective compressors. And I'll show you what I did here. Let's solo out the basses together. So yeah, we're reducing. What I want to do here on the bus is I don't want to reduce a lot. I don't want to lose a signal. I don't want to lose any energy in the bass line. All I'm doing here is just reducing a little bit of that 1 dB of the peak to get that compression. And I'm doing about a 40 gain, 40 peak reduction to make it very, very, very subtle. You don't want to overdo this part. On the bass buses, I usually don't do a hard compression. It's very, very subtle to make sure all of this sounds glued in. So let me bypass it on and off and see what we notice for a difference. To me, that's sounding way, way fuller. It's very subtle, like I've said, but it makes a huge difference in the end in your mix down, because these are going to sound, these bass lines, stems are going to sound more unified and work together in the mix down. So that's the main goal with the compressor, to obviously make this sound as one big unit, one big sound, and that's the goal. So that turned out really good. And that's it for the 2A and 3A. I'm going to go more in depth in another video with as far as attack, threshold, the output, all that stuff, release. It gets a little more complicated, and you know, this is a little bit easier to work with a general compressor to help unify your sound. So try these out if you guys haven't been using them. Again, they're from Waves, CLA 2A and 3A. But yeah, go try them out and let me know if it's helped your bass lines or synths. Use them on any bass bus, even work with them on your drum bus, to compress snares and such. Just try it out, experiment with it, and let me know how it turns out. We'll see you next time.